Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. The architecture of modern pedagogy, the structures of curriculum design, assessment, and instructional sequencing, owes an immense debt to the early 20th century psychologist Edward Lee Thorndike. Often hailed as the father of educational psychology, Thorndike's seminal work, The Theory of Connectionism, or the SR bond theory, didn't just add a chapter to the field of learning. It essentially wrote the textbook. His findings, rooted in meticulous observation and experimentation, provided the very first systematic, data-driven framework for understanding how learning happens. Connectionism posits that learning is the formation of bonds, or connections, between sensory impressions, stimuli, or S, and impulses to action, responses, or R. A successful learning experience, therefore, is simply the strengthening of these SR bonds, turning tentative links into rock-solid, automatic pathways. We will undertake a comprehensive examination of Thorndike's connectionism. We will first explore the historical and experimental foundation upon which the theory rests, primarily his famous puzzle box studies. We will then conduct an exhaustive analysis of his three primary laws of learning, the laws of effect, readiness, and exercise, exploring their nuanced interpretations and the profound shifts they caused in classroom practice. Further, we will move on to dissect the lesser-known yet critically important minor laws. Finally, this analysis will turn its attention to the enduring legacy of connectionism, evaluating both its sharpest criticisms and its indispensable influence on contemporary instructional design, curriculum sequencing, and the ongoing conversation surrounding motivation and mastery in the learning environment. By the time we wrap this up, it will be clear that Thorndike's work is not a relic of the past, but the essential blueprint that still underpins how we teach today. Thorndike's work was forged in the philosophical crucible of functionalism, a school of thought that sought to understand mental processes in terms of their adaptive function. Moving away from the introspective methods of earlier psychology, Thorndike was keen on observing overt, measurable behavior. His approach was, in essence, to get empirical, to treat learning as a natural phenomenon that could be studied and quantified, just like physics or chemistry. The experimental bedrock of connectionism is undoubtedly the cat puzzle box experiments, studies that have now become legendary in psychology circles. Thorndike placed hungry cats inside wooden crates, or puzzle boxes, that could only be opened by performing a specific, often complex, series of actions: pulling a loop, pressing a lever, or stepping on a platform. Outside the box, a tempting reward, usually food, served as the potent motivation. What Thorndike observed was a classic case of trial and error learning. Initially, the cat engaged in a host of frantic, random behaviors, scratching at the walls, biting the bars, and generally thrashing about. This chaotic activity, what Thorndike termed multiple response, slowly and haphazardly led to the desired action, accidentally hitting the lever. With each subsequent trial, the unnecessary, ineffective actions, the errors were gradually weeded out. While the one successful action, the trial, was performed more quickly, the latency or the time it took the cat to escape steadily decreased over successive attempts. The cat was not thinking its way out in an aha moment, but rather stamping in the correct connection between the stimulus, being in the box, and the successful response, hitting the lever. This progressive decrease in error time formed the crucial empirical evidence for his theory. Learning is incremental, mechanical, and fundamentally about strengthening the specific SR bond that leads to a satisfactory state of affairs. From his observations, Thorndike distilled his findings into three fundamental laws of learning, concepts so powerful that they immediately began to reshape educational practice across the country. These laws explain the conditions under which SR bonds are formed, strengthened, or weakened. A. The law of effect, the weight of consequences. Of all his contributions, the law of effect is arguably Thorndike's biggest claim to fame. It states that responses that produce a satisfying or pleasant effect in a particular situation are more likely to occur again in that situation, while responses that produce a discomforting or annoying effect are less likely to occur again. Simply put, consequences drive behavior. In the early version of the law, Thorndike saw satisfaction and dissatisfaction as two sides of the same coin, each carrying equal weight. He believed that reward strengthened connections and punishment weakened them. However, in a significant revision to the law of effect in 1932, Thorndike had to backtrack. Through further experimentation, he found that reward worked far more efficiently than punishment. A positive consequence, a satisfying state, actively strengthens the SR bond, essentially cementing the correct response into the student's behavior repertoire. Conversely, an unpleasant consequence, a discomforting state or punishment, does not effectively break the bond. Instead, punishment often just suppresses the behavior temporarily or causes a different, equally undesired response, like anxiety or avoidance. Educational implications of the law of effect. This law is the engine of educational motivation and feedback. It hits the nail on the head regarding the power of positive reinforcement. In the classroom, this means 1. Immediate and positive feedback. When a student successfully solves a challenging math problem, the immediate feeling of success, the satisfying effect, solidifies the connection between the problem type, S, and the correct process, R. A teacher's praise, a good grade, or even just a nod of affirmation acts as a powerful reinforcer that stamps the knowledge in. 2. Reward over reprimand. This principle strongly cautions educators against relying on negative techniques. If a student struggles and the teacher only resorts to reprimands or low marks, the learning connection is not necessarily broken. Rather, the student may develop a negative SR bond. Math problem, S, anxiety avoidance. Effective instruction, therefore, must focus on structuring learning so that success is the norm, and the student feels the satisfying effect of accomplishment regularly. 3. The basis of mastery. The desire to feel competent, the satisfying state of mastering a skill, is what keeps a student plugging away at a task. The law of effect provides the psychological underpinning for mastery learning models, where students are given ample opportunity to succeed before moving on, thereby maximizing the satisfying effect. B. The law of readiness, the prerequisite for learning. The law of readiness focuses on the conditions within the learner that must be met before learning can effectively take place. It speaks to the preparatory, motivational, and developmental state of the learner. It can be summarized by 3 main concepts regarding the conduction unit, the neurological pathways. 1. When a conduction unit is ready to conduct, to do so is satisfying. For example, a student is ready to learn algebra, the lesson is presented, and they feel competent and satisfied. 2. When a conduction unit is ready to conduct and is forced not to do so, it is annoying. For example, a student is eager to use a new tool, but the teacher bans its use. They feel frustrated. 3. When a conduction unit is not ready to conduct and is forced to conduct, it is annoying. A primary student is forced to learn complex calculus. They feel overwhelmed and annoyed. Educational implications of the law of readiness. This law is an absolute game changer for curriculum sequencing and motivation. It suggests that teaching a concept before a student is developmentally or emotionally ready is not just inefficient, it's actively detrimental. Developmental appropriateness. Readiness underpins the entire philosophy of developmental psychology in education. It tells us that we cannot teach a child to read until their brain has developed the necessary phonological awareness and processing speed. If a teacher rushes the process, the experience will be annoying, leading to a negative SR bond with the subject matter. 2. Curriculum sequencing, scaffolding. The law mandates that curriculum must be logically sequenced or scaffolded. Before a student can write an analytical essay, they must be ready with the foundational skills of grammar, paragraph structure, and critical reading. Each lesson must be timed to build upon successfully established connections. A gap in readiness is a recipe for frustration. 3. Motivational set. Readiness also touches on the learner's emotional and attentional state. A student who is hungry, tired, or preoccupied with personal issues is not in a ready state for conduction. The effective educator, therefore, must set the stage, ensuring the learning environment is conducive and the student is mentally and emotionally prepared to engage. This might involve a quick icebreaker, a review session to activate prior knowledge, or simply ensuring the classroom is comfortable. C. The law of exercise. Practice makes permanent. The law of exercise is the most intuitive of Thorndike's laws and speaks directly to the need for practice. It is divided into two sub-laws. 1. Law of use. The more frequently an SR connection is used, the stronger it becomes. If you practice the piano daily, the skill becomes automatic. 2. Law of disuse. The less frequently an SR connection is used, the weaker it becomes, eventually fading away. If you stop speaking French, you will lose fluency. In its purest form, this law suggests that sheer repetition is the key to mastery. Educational implications of the law of exercise. While Thorndike later conceded that the law of exercise is secondary to the law of effect, meaning mere repetition without reinforcement is useless, its application remains critical. It provides the rationale for the widespread use of drill and practice in foundational skills. 1. Automaticity and fluency. In subjects like mathematics, basic arithmetic facts, 2 times 2 equals 4, or foreign language vocabulary, the goal is automaticity. The law of exercise insists that these connections must be used repeatedly until they become second nature, freeing up cognitive resources for higher-level problem solving. 2. Review and retention. To counteract the law of disuse, educators must build in systematic review sessions. Without deliberate practice and recall, learning inevitably slides away. The use of spaced repetition. Practicing a skill or concept at increasing intervals is a direct, sophisticated application of this law, designed to maximize use while minimizing effort. 3. Transfer of training. The law also provided the groundwork for Thorndike's theory of identical elements, which states that the transfer of learning from one task to another only occurs if the two tasks share common elements, stimuli or responses. This means if we want a student to transfer algebraic skills to a physics problem, the physics problem's structure must look similar enough to the algebraic training problems to trigger the correct SR bond. This killed the old notion of faculty psychology that held that difficult subjects like Latin inherently train the mind, regardless of the relevance.